Picture this. Deep in the wilderness, miles away from the nearest town, where the forest feels alive and every sound echoes through the trees. My friends and I had rented a small wooden cabin hidden in the mountains for a weekend getaway. We wanted peace, fresh air, and a break from the noise of the city. What we experienced instead was something none of us will ever forget, something that made us question everything we thought we knew about the forest. The first day was perfect. The cabin was old but sturdy, surrounded by towering pine trees that blocked most of the sunlight. There was a small dirt road leading to the property, and beyond that, nothing but endless wilderness. No neighbors, no cell service, and no sign of civilization for miles. It felt exciting at first, like we had escaped into a different world. That evening we built a fire outside the cabin. The air was cold, and the forest had that quiet, mysterious feeling that only appears after sunset. We cooked some food, laughed, and told stories around the fire. At one point, one of my friends joked about Bigfoot being out there somewhere in the woods watching us. We all laughed it off. The idea seemed ridiculous, at least at the time. Around 11 p.m., we decided to go inside the cabin. The fire was dying down, and the temperature had dropped. The inside of the cabin was simple: a small living room, 2 bedrooms, and a tiny kitchen. The wooden walls creaked occasionally as the wind moved through the trees outside. Not long after we settled in, we heard the first strange sound. It was a loud crack somewhere deep in the forest. At first, we assumed it was just a branch snapping or maybe an animal moving through the trees. The woods are full of sounds at night, so we didn't think much about it. But then another crack followed, closer this time. We looked at each other, suddenly quiet. Probably a deer, someone said. But the footsteps didn't sound like a deer. They were slow, heavy, deliberate. Thud, thud, thud. Each step sounded like something extremely large moving through the forest floor. Whatever it was, it wasn't trying to be quiet. One of my friends walked over to the window and peeked outside. The porch light barely illuminated the clearing around the cabin, and beyond that was total darkness. He stared out there for a few seconds before stepping back. "I don't see anything," he said, but his voice sounded unsure. For a while, the noises stopped. The forest went completely silent. And that's when things got really strange. From somewhere out in the darkness, we heard a long, deep howl. It wasn't like a wolf or a coyote. It was deeper, almost human-like, but far more powerful. The sound echoed through the trees and seemed to vibrate through the walls of the cabin. None of us spoke. The howl lasted for several seconds before fading into the distance. One of my friends whispered, "What was that?" No one had an answer. We tried to convince ourselves it was just some kind of animal. Maybe a bear or a strange call from a wolf pack. But deep down, it didn't sound like anything we had ever heard before. About 10 minutes later, we heard movement again. This time it was right outside the cabin. Heavy footsteps circled the building slowly. The wooden porch creaked as something stepped onto it. You could actually hear the boards bending under the weight. That's when we realized whatever was outside was huge. We turned off the lights inside the cabin so we could see better through the windows. The moonlight faintly lit the clearing, but most of the area was still covered in shadow. Then we heard something drag across the porch. Scrrraap. It sounded like large claws or rough hands scraping against the wooden railing. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. One of my friends slowly moved toward the door and looked through the small glass window at the top. He froze instantly. "What is it?" I whispered. He didn't respond at first. Then he stepped back slowly and said something that made the entire room go cold. "There's something standing out there." We rushed to the window but stayed low so whatever was outside wouldn't see us. And that's when we saw it. At the edge of the porch light, partially hidden in the shadows, stood a massive figure. It had to be at least 8 feet tall. Its entire body was covered in dark hair, and its shoulders were incredibly wide. The creature stood completely still for a moment, almost like it was listening. Then it moved. The way it walked was terrifying. It wasn't like an animal on 4 legs. It walked upright, like a human, but with a slow, heavy stride that shook the porch with each step. Thud, thud, thud. It approached the front door. We backed away immediately. Something slammed against the side of the cabin. Bang. The entire wall rattled. Someone whispered, "That has to be a bear." But bears don't walk upright like that. And bears don't stare through windows. We heard breathing outside the door, deep, heavy breathing. Whatever was there was right on the other side of the wood. Then the doorknob started to move. Slowly. It twisted slightly, then snapped back. The creature let out a low growl that sounded almost frustrated. Then suddenly, smash! Something hit the door so hard it shook the entire cabin. We jumped back as dust fell from the ceiling. It hit the door again. Bang, bang. At this point we were completely panicking. The door was thick wood, but whatever was outside was incredibly strong. Then everything stopped. The silence was even more terrifying. For about 30 seconds there was no sound at all. Then we heard footsteps moving away from the porch. Thud, thud, thud. They circled the cabin again, moving slowly through the gravel outside. At one point the creature stopped directly beside the window. We could hear it sniffing the air. Long, deep breaths. It felt like it knew we were inside. Suddenly a massive hand slammed against the window. The glass shook violently. We all screamed and stumbled backward. Through the glass we saw the shape clearly for the first time. The creature's face was partially visible in the moonlight. It looked almost human, but not quite. The brow was heavy, the nose wide, and the eyes reflected the light with an eerie glow. It stared into the cabin for several seconds. Then it let out another deafening roar. The sound was so powerful it felt like the entire forest echoed with it. Moments later, we heard something else in the distance. Another howl, then another. It sounded like multiple creatures responding from deeper in the forest. That's when we realized something even more terrifying. The thing outside might not have been alone. Suddenly the creature outside the cabin stepped back into the darkness. Its massive shape disappeared beyond the reach of the porch light. For several minutes, we heard movement in the trees. Branches snapping, leaves rustling, heavy footsteps moving farther away. Then, nothing. The forest returned to complete silence. We stayed awake the entire night, too afraid to sleep. Every little sound made us jump. We kept expecting the creature to come back and try to break into the cabin again. But it never did. When the sun finally started to rise, we slowly opened the front door. The porch looked like something out of a nightmare. Deep scratches covered the railing. One of the wooden boards was cracked like it had been hit with a hammer. And in the dirt around the cabin were massive footprints. They were unlike any animal tracks we had ever seen. Each footprint was enormous, shaped almost like a human foot but far larger. The stride between them was huge, suggesting whatever made them had incredibly long legs. We followed the tracks a short distance into the forest before they disappeared among the rocks and trees. None of us said much after that. We packed our things quickly and left the cabin that same morning. To this day, I still don't know exactly what we saw that night. Maybe it was some unknown animal. Maybe it was something science hasn't discovered yet. Or maybe, just maybe, the legends about Bigfoot wandering deep forests aren't legends at all. Because whatever stood on that porch that night was real. And it was watching us.